Hello, and welcome to our 11:30 a.m. press conference, Why All Rainbows Don't Look Alike. Our speaker this morning is Jean Ricard, research scientist at the Center for the Scientific Study of Optical Atmospheric Phenomena at the National Center for Meteorological Research.
Good morning, ladies and gents, and welcome to this presentation about rainbows. I'm here to present a brand new classification of rainbows in 12 classes. But before starting, I would, as a transition from the last talk about on Mars, so on our way from Mars to planet Earth, we could stop for 10 seconds on Venus. And I would like to, on Venus, since the 70s, there are a few papers describing rainbows in the atmosphere of Venus. I would like to add two precisions. First, they are not exactly rainbows, they are glories. Glories are similar to rainbows produced by water droplets. But they can't be explained by ray optics, a bit more complicated. And second, the presence of glories or rainbows in exoplanets is a very interesting and promising tool for looking for water, because the presence of water droplets could mean a presence of life. Okay, so we come back to our talk. I first would like to thank the AGU staff, and especially Lee Cooper, who invited me to this press conference. I would like to thank my co-authors and all the observers who have provided pictures of rainbows, the ones who are in the CPAL mailing list, and the other ones as well. And last but not least, I would like to thank Dr. Philippe Bougeot and Peter Adams, who are directors of CNRM and CPAL, and who have provided the financial funds for this study. So I'm going to describe a brand new classification of rainbows in 12 classes, which is a balance between simplicity and completeness of rainbows. In the first part, I will describe the previous classification of rainbows, so we'll understand the need for a new classification. And in the second part, I will give a few examples of what we can expect from the new classification. So let's start by describing the four components of a rainbow. The basic. So in a rainbow, you have got four components. The first one is the primary bow. Well, the primary bow, if you talk to someone in the street, a lay person, that's his image of a rainbow. So it's a vivid arch of colorful arches with the red on the outside, the violet on the inside. That's what we think as a rainbow. Many people are aware of the secondary bow, which is fainter than the first one, which is above the first one, wider than the first one, and with the color reversed. So you have got red on the inside and the violet, blue-violet on the outside. The third component of a rainbow is a dark band between the primary and the secondary, and that dark band is called the Alexander band. And there is a strong contrast between this dark part of the sky and the very clear part of the sky, which lies below the primary bow. So the contrast between this part of the sky and this one. So those three components are very simple. They are explainable through ray optics. There is a fourth component of the rainbow, which are called supernumerary bows, and they can be found inside the primary bow and outside the secondary bow. So you have got supernumerary inside the primary bow, and they are faint, but they are there outside the secondary bow. So just a word about the origin of the primary bow, explained through ray optics. If you have got a ray of sun in A entering water droplets, there is a refraction at the entrance of the drop. So part is reflected and is lost for the rainbow, and part enters the drop. Then there is a refraction at the back of the drop in R. So part obviously is refracted and is lost for the rainbow. And in S, you have got a second refraction when the ray goes out of the drop. So you can compute by the angle of deviation, D, in function of the angle of incidence. And you notice that there is a least deviated ray, which is called the Ricard's ray, from a French scientist, Ricard. Now, for the secondary bow, the same, it's ray optics. It's exactly the same. You have got a refraction at the entrance of the drop, reflection in R, and in S, instead of considering what goes out, we consider the part which has a second reflection at the back of the drop to go towards the observer. So if we compute in the same way, instead of having a minimum of deviation, a maximum deviation, this time it's a minimum of deviation. And the Alexander bound, the gray bound, the dark band we have which is observed, is characterized by no outgoing rays after one or two reflections in the drop. Okay, so now we can start to answer the question of the title: why all rainbows don't look alike? They don't look alike because when we look at a rainbow, 1 second later, the drops which form the primary bow and the secondary bow are not the same because they are falling, and so all the time the rainbow is changing. And if you look carefully, after a few minutes, you will start to see some changes in each rainbow. So now for the supernumerary bows, they can't be explained by ray optics. It's beyond the topic, the presentation of today. It's a very important topic of research for us. And if you want to know more about this, you can ask questions and I can explain you in 5 minutes what is it all about. Now Liu in 1980 wrote that in his famous textbook that the rainbow is probably the best known phenomenon of atmospheric physics. So it's legitimate to ask the question, can anything new be said about the rainbow? And we have already answered yes. So here is the new classification in 12 classes. So we'll go through it a bit later, in more detail a bit later. I would like to insist at this point that it's a balance between an exhaustive description of the rainbows, so the class 12, where you have got the anomalous, between brackets, rainbows, the monster of Mother Nature, if we could call them. It should remain very as small as possible. And another, we want to be simple, so we don't want to have to answer very difficult questions. So everything must have. So 12 classes is really the minimum for describing the diversity of the rainbows. Okay. So now, even though the study of rainbows can be traced back more than 2,000 years, they are still not fully understood. So the history of rainbows is characteristic of the history of sciences and is extremely interesting. Humphreys, in his famous textbook Physics of the Air, pointedly noted that the explanations given of the rainbow may well be said to explain beautifully that which does not occur and to leave unexplained which does. So I say it again because it's very important. It's easy to explain beautifully that which does not occur and to leave unexplained which does. So now we move to the Bible book about the rainbows, which is called The Rainbow Bridge, published in 2001 by Lee and Fraser. It's the most recent and complete book on the rainbow. And they give a so-called map of the rainbow's colors, which is a very useful tool. I use it very, very often. It's an excellent reference. And it gives in X, you have got the drop, the diameter or the radius of the water droplets. And in Y, you have got the angle of the rainbows. For instance, for large drops, on the right side of this diagram, you see that you have got the red and the yellow, the green, and all the colors, and you see the supernumerary bows at the bottom. This is a wonderful tool for scientists, but it's not a good tool for classification. So for classification, we go back to Météo-France in 1954, which gave a very good classification in 6 classes. So we go a bit into more detail about this classification. So for each classes of diameter, Météo-France gives a precise description of what you are going to expect. For instance, for 1-2 millimeters, the rainbow, you have got a very bright violet and vivid green. The bow contains pure red, has scarcely any blue. Spurious bows, that's another way of saying supernumerary bows. Spurious bows are numerous, 5, for example. Violet pink alternating with green, merging without interruption into the Supranarrable, and so on and so on. Okay? So that's so each time on the right hand side I show a typical member of the class, these 6 classes. So this is a good starting point, I would say, but there is a big problem with this classification. The problem is that many bows are not classified don't fit in these 6 classes. So the big drawer, we put other rainbows. Yeah, it's full. It's full of bows. So if you look, here are a few examples of bows which are not classified. Immediately you think, oh, that's the height of the sun, the solar height. So now we go back to Lee, which gives a list of factors that affect the color and the luminances and which are not considered in textbooks. So it's an exhaustive list of factors. And in that list of factors, it's a typo, but the solar height is not even cited. So it's more for illustrating that in the textbooks, the impact of the solar angle is never considered as one of the main parameters controlling the aspect of the rainbow. So now how does it work? Obviously, at sunset or sunrise, the color of the sun and the intensity of the incoming light changes dramatically. Here in the CPAL rainbow model, the solar spectrum at the top of the atmosphere is assimilated to a black body at 5,000 Kelvin. So here it's given by the Planck law at the top of the atmosphere on the left panel. And since the path through the atmosphere changes dramatically with the solar height. The rainbow, the color of the sun changes dramatically. So here, that's the solar, the Planck's law, the solar at the top of the sun at the top of the atmosphere, and when you go, the solar height increases. You go from a yellow sun to an orange, and you end up with a red sun, and the intensity of the sun decreases tremendously. So the input of the rainbow changes, and the aspect of the rainbow changes as well. So now you could think that instead of the diameters of the droplets, you could classify rainbows according to the solar height. So here is an attempt of it. So it's very similarly to MINET. We have got here 4 classes of solar heights and a precise description of the bows and member. But in fact, we have got the same shortcomings because you have got a lot of rainbows which are not classified in this way. So the strategy here is to unlearning what we know about rainbows. In practice, this means stopping using the rainbow models for defining the classes and defining directly the classes from the pictures. So for keeping it simple, we use only 3 characteristics for defining all the classes: the visibility of the color bands, the strength of the Alexander band, or more the contrast between the Alexander band and the light sky under the primary bow, and the visibility of the supernumerary bows. All right. So here you can notice that in the 12 classes we are only using those 3 criteria. All right. So if you compare to the previous 2 previous classifications I just showed, classes 1, 2, 3, 4, and 9 in first approximation do not depend on the solar height and depend solely only on the diameter of the drops. Classes 10 and 11 in the first approximation do not depend on the diameter of the drops, but depend solely on the solar height. Classes 5, 6, 7, and 8 are a mix of the two and depend the most dependent parameter being the solar height. Okay, so in the rest of my talk, I will focus I want what. So this is a solid basis for future research. Our present research is based mainly on 1, 2, 3, 4. For the study of the supernumerary area, and another topic I will show in a minute. And all the other ones are used for the solar height, as I have shown. And I will give an example from classes 10 and 11 to display the advantages of such new classification. Before going further, I would like to add 2 remarks. There is an important parameter, which is the color of the background, that is not taken into account. So on the left picture here, you see that the rainbow, if you are an artist, a painter, you would say, oh, look at that rainbow over the green, over the black, over the blue, over the white. It's completely different. It's not at all the same color. And okay, but so we have to unlearn, but we know that we are not really interested in I'm not a painter, so I'm not interested in the color of the background. But this is as a very practical consequence, because if we wanted to classify in an automated way the pictures directly without a human eye, the first thing that will come out is the color of the background. So up to now, we have no way of getting rid of that color of the background, and it's a very difficult problem for us. The second point is that any rainbow might belong to more than one class. So let's start by this picture on the right side, which comes from the class 12, the anomalous rainbows. If we chop it into bits, if you take the foot of the rainbow here, of the primary bow, it's yellow and orange, all right? So if you take the secondary bow, you see all the colors. Here, it's almost a mist bow. So if you come back here, you could classify that rainbow in class 10 at the foot. Okay, you could classify it maybe I don't know another class for this secondary bow, and the top of the secondary bow it would be in class 9. You could say it's a very weird rainbow, but in fact all rainbow in class 1 and 3 could be classified in two parts. The foot of the rainbow doesn't show many spurious bows here. You can see it. But when you go up to the top of the arch, you are with colder droplets and smaller droplets, and you see. So it's quite normal. It's quite a normal phenomenon that it happens often that many rainbows belong to more than one class. Okay. So now the scientific interest of the new classification. So this new classification is a solid basis for challenging our understanding of rainbows. So we have, at least we think, we have got a relatively good picture of the difference between the classes. We understand that quite well. But for each class, if we look at the individual pictures, can we explain the observed variability? And for instance, I will show that for rainbows at sunrise and sunset, class 10 and 11 in a minute. It's also, since we are very interested in the supernumerary area, the class 1 to 4 is a very interesting topic for us. And the last topic is we are about the influence of the temperature of the water droplets. If you have questions about this, I can answer that in the questions. So to finish, I present two pictures of rainbows that have come as a shock in my career as a scientist. The first one on the left is a picture that was presented at the Light and Color conference in Fairbanks. And I was just giving the next day a talk about aspects of rainbows at sunset or on sunrise. And these pictures did not fit the picture. So I will come back to this in a minute. And the second one is a picture found on the internet by a friend of my youngest son. And that was I was very pleased. I started to discuss, to analyze this picture, and then I discussed with my son and this friend, and I could see they were smiling. And in fact, this picture came from, they like playing video games, and it was not an actual rainbow, it was... All right, so we come back to the first picture. So why is it a shock to discover this picture? So the second panel from on the top shows the output of the model. So when you are at sunset, okay, the red is everywhere, but you keep a hint of yellow and green. You see, the orange vanishes, but you keep always a hint of yellow and green. So to illustrate this, on this panel, it's really at sunset, and if you enlarge here, you have that yellow and green, okay? So even when I was seeing red bows with the eye of face, all the time I was expecting to have other colors like this. So discovering by a famous observer a red ball like this came as a surprise. So at first I thought that, okay, Claudia said it's just below the horizon, it's in the Alps, so I said, okay, it's because it's in the mountains, and all right. But in fact, when you start looking more precisely, you have got red balls like this, which are not in the mountains, obviously, and which are completely red. So what's going on there? What's going on is that the solar ray are bent in a outrage. The angle can be huge by what happens in the boundary layer, by what happens in the first meter above the ground. So as an illustration of this, here we have got the picture we have already shown. So you see, in fact, from a theoretical point of view, the primary bow, the colors of the primary bow and the secondary should be the same. Okay, here they are completely different. So what happens is that the droplets which produce the first bow are much, much lower than the one who produce the secondary bow. And so if we are like here, which explains the big difference between those things. And I show another picture. So it happens. It's something which is more frequent than we can think. Okay, so in England, well, in Ireland, they have got, as you know, leprechauns. And those leprechauns, they like counting their gold. So, and they hide the pot of gold. It's famous. Everybody knows this. At the end of the rainbow. So very often people ask me, "Have you found the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow?" So the answer is no. But what I found in rainbow, I found happiness in rainbow, and I hope you. I invite you to try and find happiness in rainbows by coming and looking at my poster, which can be downloaded from the site, the AGU sites. Thank you.
Are there any questions from reporters in the room?
Jonathan Amos, BBC News. So it's all very interesting. Is there a particular use for this? I mean, does it tell you something about the atmosphere? Does it tell you something about the weather? What are the uses of having this broader classification of rainbows?
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So I hope I have answered in my talk. If you don't have, there is a need for that classification, because if you don't have, as long as you don't have this classification, you don't really look at the rainbows. You don't really look at the rainbows as they are. You know what you want to, how the rainbow should look like, and you forget to look at. I have shown that in my presentation. If you classify the rainbows, the red bows, knowing in your mind that they come from the solar height, you miss a point. that in fact other important physical processes are at work for this. So can I put it? It's a solid basis for challenging our understanding of rainbows. And another example I will give, because the impact of the temperature of the droplets on the aspect of the rainbows. It might be largely underestimated. Why? Because it goes in the same way as the impact of the diameter. Okay? When the diameter decreases, when you have got small droplets, your rainbow becomes more white, the colors are less vivid, okay? And it's the same for the temperature. And when you have a normal rainbow which is a bit far, the foot of the rainbow, the temperature is much higher than on top of the arch, where the droplets are smaller and are colder. So it's difficult to untangle between the effect of the temperature of the droplets and the water radius. So that's another example.
Are there any other questions from reporters in the room?
So I'm just looking at your poster, and I'm wondering if this is Tia Ghosh from Live Science. I'm just wondering if you can explain what some of these abbreviations are. So in the new classification, you say ACV, SAB, SUP. Like, what do those stand for?
Okay, maybe it's too small, but it's explained here. ACV, it means all colors are visible. SAB, it means a strong Alexander band. WAB, weak Alexander band. Can you read? Can you see it? Yeah. And if we can see the supernumerary bows or not. And another thing I forgot to mention is that in this classification we consider only 6 colors. Okay, because traditionally in textbooks there is another color which is called indigo between the violet and the blue. Personally, and maybe I've got a problem. I've got problems really distinguishing the indigo from the violet and the blue.
Are there any other questions?
Alison Hawks, freelance KQED News. Just wondering if you could, I'm a little fuzzy on how these 12 classes of rainbows, the classification really differs from previous classifications. So could you say, like, what are the main differences in the way you've classified versus the way, as previously? I understand the concept that you were, like, the other ones weren't inclusive of all the different types of rainbows, but from the specific things that you were looking at, how do your classifications differ? Yeah,
so it's a very interesting question. In fact, if we compare to MINET, all right, well, I can just, you have seen MINET. It's very different because here, the mist bow, all the droplets, the mist bow, and when the droplets are small, we put them all here in the class 9. And these 4 classes are not present in MINET because MINET does not consider the strength of the Alexander band. Okay. So in fact, those 4 classes are specifically designed for us for studying the supernumerary bands, because so they don't recover at all the classes by MINET. Okay. If you come back to MINET, well, you will check it. It's very different, okay? You don't know. If you compare to the classes of rainbows, we have more classes for describing the colors than 4, okay? So you could say it's a mix between the 2 previous classifications, but it's more than that because it's more simple. Because the one problem with those, where are they? Okay. One problem with all this classification is that you have a very precise description of the bow, but you understand that you have plenty of bows that doesn't fit any of these descriptions. And in the new classification, it is so simple. You can assign in 1 second. You can assign the bow to a class. Have I answered your question?
Yeah.
So I've never seen an all yellow rainbow or an all red rainbow. Like when would you see those? They seem pretty unusual.
So which picture are you? Which one? For instance, this one. Okay, so that's a rainbow which is obviously at sunset or sunrise. The sun is very low because obviously the phenomenon I have described here is at work. Okay, you can't if the sun is high above the horizon, you would never have this possible. Okay. So yellow, orange bows, they occur at sunset or sunrise. All right. Red bows, it's the same. They occur at sunset or sunrise. Now, if you have all the colors visible, it can't be sunset or sunrise. Okay. Sorry, repeat me exactly the question. If you have a rainbow looking like this, obviously it's small drops. Okay, and for these bows, you just go through the description of these 10 classes, and you will find out by yourself how it works.
Bas?
Bas and Hunt, freelance. Am I correct in understanding that of all these classes, you know how these rainbows come about, but that the supernumerary bows are a problem, and that you don't really understand them?
No, it's not. We don't understand the supernumerary bows. We can't say. What we are not sure is which process is really at work. So I can give explain more about this. So for the so here I just describe again this picture. So you have got the sun on the left here. The Descartes ray is in green and orange. So you have got an accumulation of light on this ray, but on this side of the ray. Okay, and so now obviously it's diffraction creating the supernumerary bows, but you have in fact two very different effects. You have got the fact that given one angle of deviation, you have got two incident rays giving that angle. Okay, one above the Descartes ray and one below. Okay, like that. So in fact, those two rays then can add constructively or destructively, and this gives this kind of pattern where you have supernumerary bow. So that's like interferences. Okay, we could call that interferences. And there is a second effect. Okay, let me find something. If you have got a sharp edge, and if you've got a sharp edge, so you have a source of light here, a sharp edge, and if you look at what is happening, okay, if you have got ray lights, okay, it's very simple. It's dark here, below where it's covered, and you have got lights decreasing exponentially when you go away from the source. But if you look at, it's a very famous problem of diffraction. What happens is, in fact, just under the under B, so in fact the the edge between what is lighted and not lighted is not sharp. It's not sharp, it's blurred. And the maximum is not exactly right under the source, but a bit further. Okay? So you have got, so in the lighted area here, even if you are not aware of it, you have got fluctuations of the intensity. Okay? We don't see it usually with the naked eye, but you have got these fluctuations which are given by the Airy function, the so-called Airy function. So you have a concurrence between these two effects. So this picture is wonderful. We come back to it. So it's obvious that when you have small droplets, where here you have got very strong bows, the interference effect is very strong. But if you have got big droplets here, it seems that okay, you have got. It seems that it's the other effect, the sharp edge effect, which is working. Okay, so
are there any other?
There. But it's a very interesting topic.
Anne Rosenthal, Nature Nearby. I was interested in how particulate pollution might affect a rainbow.
A particular?
Particulate pollution, air pollution of particulates.
Yeah, okay. So, that might be the question of the previous speaker, I don't know. Because when you have got aerosols, it changes the color of the sky. Instead of so if you are in a very high up in the mountains, you have got almost a violet sky. Then at sea surface, the sky is less violet. And if it's polluted, it's more. It could become like yellow. Okay, this is all because of the interactions between the light and the particles, the molecule of the air and the particle of the aerosols. So it changes your background, so it can change the aspect of the rainbow. So the answer is yes. Particles have an effect on, aerosols have an effect on the aspect of the rainbow.
Are there any other questions in the room?
Okay. Here, please.
I can't hear you.
So this is Tia from Life Science. So when do the only red rainbows appear? At sunset?
Sorry, which rainbows?
The red only rainbows?
Oh yeah, only at sunset. Yeah.
Okay, and at sunrise, which one?
Oh no, sunset or sunrise?
Sunrise.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's because the light because of the angle of the sun.
Yeah. So in fact, if you take the Earth, if you look up in the sky, high up in the sky, the path through the atmosphere is very short. You don't have a lot of atmosphere on your between the sun and your eye. You don't go through a lot of atmosphere. But if you, especially at sunset, you understand that the distance can be enormous. So if you look at how we modelize it in, where is it? Yeah, you see the effect. It's. I don't know if you can read. I can't read here, but the factor is tremendous. So your sun is much less intense. The intensity of the solar light is. You could. You should not do it, but at sunset you could almost look directly at the sun. And when you are, and otherwise in the younger day, you should really not. You should not do it, but you understand the difference of intensity.
Yeah. So, but why does that mean the rainbow itself will be red? Is it because only the red wavelengths are able to make it through the atmosphere at that angle and distance, or?
So it's that figure here, the transmittance through the atmosphere. It depends, so here is the visible spectrum. Here you have got the violet, here you have got the red. And you see what happens at low angles, the red manages to go through, but the other wavelengths, they are completely gone.
Are there any other questions from reporters in the room?
Lucas Joel, Earth Magazine. How do you think other researchers are going to use this classification?
First, there are not so many people working on optical atmospheric phenomena. So we are a small group, I would say. But it could be a very useful tool for all the observers, because especially if you are a new observer, since that classification is very simple, you could assign it by yourself to a class and directly understand what's going on your picture. Okay? Because otherwise, if you have to go through something like this, it's more difficult. You have to be more an expert. It's less simple. You read to all of them, you compare to you, and which one is the closest. Okay, it's more difficult to assess. Because here, the question, you have got only 3 questions. Okay, you have got only the visibility of the color bands, the strength of the Alexandrian bands, and the visibility of the supernumerary rainbows. If you answer those 3 questions, you assign all rainbow to a class. It's very simple.
Does studying rainbows contribute to the larger field of atmospheric physics or other fields? How does, do rainbows contribute to other scientists working on other issues?
I have just already answered about exoplanets, because if you see rainbows or glories, so it means it's a very strong hint towards water droplets and to the presence of life. So that's a first answer. So repeat exactly your question.
Does it contribute to the field of atmospheric physics, to other scientists working on other aspects of that field? Understanding rainbows, does that help them?
From a theoretical, with a big C, with capital C, from a theoretical point of view, we understand the rainbows. So what is not understood really is the details of it. You understand? Where as I have explained, the big picture is already there. All right, but in fact, when you try to understand, is this phenomenon at work, this physical process, or this, it's a big unknown. Okay, it's true for the rainbow, but it's true for all optical atmospheric phenomena. If you look at glories, if you look at halos, if you look at the green flag, whatever you look at, the big picture is there. Okay, we know, but in practice, when you look at pictures, you are always asking yourself questions.
Okay, that concludes our press conference. Thank you very much. Our next press event will be at 4 o'clock, NASA's Magnetosphere Multi-Scale Mission, Understanding Our Space Environment press workshop. Thank you.